Okay, guys, jumping into part 2 here. We're talking about the effects that sociology had on the rest of the social world. We talked about the 5 core philosophers, all of which were extremely important when we looked at how they were influential to sociology and the study of sociology. The last one we talked about was Max Weber. Again, he was one of the most influential of all sociologists because he raised issues that remain controversial even today. And you can see why, because we were talking about religion, right? He disagreed with Karl Marx because Weber defined religion as that central force to social change. That Protestantism encourages greater economic development and was the central factor in the rise of capitalism in a lot of countries. So that Protestant belief system encouraged its members, if you recall, to embrace that change. And so he utilized that through different signs. He believed Protestants sought signs that were in God's will. And of course, that financial success became that major sign. So the more money they made, the more secure they were about their religious standing overall. So if they were able to save that money, put it towards something much larger in that sense, right? The more that they were going to be able to secure their ability to go to heaven. Weber called that behavior that Protestant ethic. And he called that readiness to invest capital in order to make that money the spirit of capitalism. So I'm hoping that makes sense to you guys. That was sort of his claim to fame in that sense. Weber advocated that sociological research should be a value-free, personal values or biases that would not influence social research, and believed that things should be totally neutral in their objectivity in that sense. Sociologists, of course, agree to objectivity. When you think about it, that's a very valid goal, but acknowledge that no one can escape values entirely. You know, we are all human beings. We all have very strong beliefs, I'm sure, in certain types of things. So it can be very hard to not see some kind of sense of values put somewhere in people's research. And of course, replication when a study is repeated to see if those same results are found. Weber believed that it's one means to avoid that distortion that values can cause. So the ability for for a study to be replicated again by somebody else is a way to ensure that that study is a valid study, right? And not just throw out with different kinds of people's values. So although sociologists can agree that research should be objective, the proper purposes and uses of sociology are a lot of times argued amongst different sociologists. Think about that. Everybody's sort of taking some kind of position, and that proper role of a sociologist is to advance that understanding of social life from both perspectives of it, right? While others believe that it's the responsibility of sociologists, on the other hand, to explain harmful social arrangements of society, which we do on both sides. So that's why we always deal with a lot of controversial topics, right? Because on one side, there's those that are saying, understand that social behavior, you know? And on the other side, and to gain that knowledge, right? And to make sure that. On the other side, we can say that we should be used to investigate more harmful social conditions, right? And sociologists should then figure out ways to reform our society. So you have two sort of conflicting, trying to teeter, and balance each other out here in this sense. Weber argued that sociologists, right, should use these social facts to move past that subjective meaning and attach it to our own behavior. He believed that there are social facts, there's patterns of behaviors, that characterize certain groups, right, and reflect certain conditions of our society, right? Things that were happening back in 19th century obviously are not going to reflect things that are happening in 2021 necessarily, right? Different social factors are affecting the way that we interact in the world and how we behave and the things that we do, right? But when you look at it, they can also reinforce each other at certain times. And so we want to look at that from all angles of it in sociology. All right, so let's jump back here. in the early years of sociology, the field was dominated by men predominantly, right? Because rigidly, there were very defined social rules that were occurring in that society, right? So that prevented a lot of women from pursuing an education. Women were supposed to devote themselves to the 4Ks, okay? In that time, remember, the 4Ks were Kirche, Kuchen, Kinder, and Kleider, which were church, cooking, children, and clothes. Okay? So at that same time, a few women from wealthy families managed to get an education. A few of them even studied sociology. Although, of course, there was sexism that was happening in the universities that stopped them from earning certain advanced degrees or becoming professors or even having their own research recognized. Okay? Let's talk about a couple of these women. Harriet Martineau. She studied social life in both Great Britain and the United States, and she published some really interesting works called The Society in America, decades before Durkheim and Weber were even born. Okay? So, but again, remember, a female during that time frame, her work was not valued like men were. Okay? So while her original research has been largely ignored by the discipline, she's known for her translations of Comate's ideas into English. Okay. There are a couple other women, Marian Talbot, Grace Abbott. Again, very strong female-driven research in that field that had very strong ties to sociology. Okay. Let's keep moving along here. The first departments of sociology in the United States were at the University of Kansas, Atlanta University, and the University of Chicago. But again, you're looking at 1892 up until 1899, somewhere in there. The first in Canada was at McGill University in 1922. Okay. So Albion Small was one of the founder of Department of Sociology at the University of Chicago. He established the American Journal of Sociology, which is still a huge publication for sociology. Okay. The Department of Sociology at the University of Chicago dominated North America sociology, and of course, we had quite a bit of other early sociologists from the University of Chicago, Robert E. Park, Ernest Burgess, George Herbert Mead, which we'll talk about here down the road. So the situation of women in North America was very similar to that was happening in Europe at that time frame. So, a lot of females at this point were denied roles in universities. Many returned to social activism, working with the poor, and regarded as social workers in that sense. But if you realistically look back at what was happening during that periodic time, you can see that they were actually pioneers in sociology. They just were not recognized in that sense. Okay. Jane Addams is an example of a sociologist who was able to combine the role of the sociologist part of it with that of a social reformer. In 1889, she founded something called the Hull House, which is a settlement house for the poor. And they worked to sort of bridge the gap between the powerful and the powerless. Okay. So here we have people that were immigrants that had nowhere else to go, didn't know where to turn to, right? They came to the Hull House. She had created this place. And so sociologists from nearby the University of Chicago visited the Hull House frequently, and they saw that she was the only sociologist, quintessentially, that was doing work outside of that. Like, she was not only believing in what she was talking about, talking about identifying these issues that were happening from a poverty kind of level, but she was enacting that change that was happening. So she's the only sociologist to have won the Nobel Peace Prize. She was awarded that in 1931. Okay. Other really strong sociologists at that time frame, African American professionals, think about it, were faced with sort of the same dilemma. They were not necessarily recognized despite their intellectual brilliance because of other factors, whether it be gender or race. W.E.B. Du Bois was the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard. He conducted countless research on race relations in the United States. He published one book a year on the subject between 1896 and 1914. Think about that time frame. This is a time in which blatant racism very much still going on. And despite his accomplishments, he encountered that prejudice and discrimination in his professional and personal life. So when he attended professional sociology meetings, he was not necessarily permitted to eat or stay in the same hotels as the white sociologists. So all of a sudden, we begin to see that he was becoming frustrated at the lack of improvements in race relations. So he turned to social action, okay? He felt that by founding the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, along with Jane Addams and Florence Kelley and others from the Hull House, he was able to create a change, right? This is somebody that created the NAACP, something that still exists to this day, because he was finding that his research wasn't enough. So he took it to that next level and was actually engaging in the work itself and creating something to make a difference for social change. Many early North American sociologists, again, sort of combine that role of sociologist with that of the social reformer kind of concept. At the University of Chicago, Park and Burgess studied many urban problems and offered suggestions on how to alleviate them. 1940 came around and sociologists became more concerned with establishing sociology as an academic discipline here in the U.S. So their emphasis shifted from social reform more so to social theory. They wanted to just make it an academic discipline. Talcott Parsons here developed abstract models of society to show how the parts of society are harmoniously working together. Countering that development, on the other hand, was C. Wright Mills, who urged sociologists to get back to social reform. He believed he saw the emergency of the power elite as threatening people's freedom in that sense, which we had talked about earlier, sort of with that class conflict concept. Okay. So, the debate over what should be the proper goals of sociological analysis are still continued today, right? Whether we're analyzing society or reforming society, doesn't matter. People are still arguing exactly what sociology is meant to do. Applied sociology, okay, exists between these two extremes. One of the first attempts, right, is to simply, let's talk about the basic and pure sociology. Here we're understanding sociological research for the pure purpose of making discoveries about life in human groups, right? It's just for us to gain knowledge, to understand things. Why are things working the way that they are? That sort of concept. On the second here, all of a sudden, we're shifting more towards applied sociology. This is the use of sociology to solve problems, right? All of a sudden, we have things that are happening at a micro level, right? And all of a sudden, we want to magnify it to a macro level. How can we apply this to a whole larger group of people, right? Think about what W.E.B. Du Bois did with the NAACP. He saw that his work in the classroom wasn't enough. And all of a sudden he says, all right, I got to figure out how I can get my work, how I can get my voice and make macro level changes at a much larger level to the mass groups. So thus he created the NAACP so that they could be out in the field working to strive to make that happen. Again, here we're looking at that use to solve those problems in that sense. Okay? So, let me say this. Applied sociologists work from a variety of settings, whether they're from a business to high-tech organizations to government and even nonprofit organizations, right? Applied sociologist is that application of sociological knowledge in some specific setting, rather than an attempt to rebuild society. So both sociologists focus on social reform on one side, but they also emphasize basic sociology which reject that applied sociology concept. All right. Now we're jumping into the theoretical perspectives in sociology. You guys have probably heard the concept of theory. It's that general statement about how some parts of the world fit together and how they work. It's that explanation of how two or more facts are related to one another. So sociologists use 3 different theoretical perspectives to understand that social behavior. So we're going to jump into these 3 main theories. Not today, but that's going to be where we sort of lead into. I want you guys to understand that these 3 core theories are what's going to guide us into everything that we talk about moving forward. Those 3 main theories are symbolic interactionism, functionalist analysis, and conflict theory. They're going to honestly be the core of everything that we talk about moving forward. They're not hard theories. I promise you they're going to make tons of sense the more that we talk about them and the more that they sort of mesh, and I give you examples. So I just wanted to finish up and wrap up the main core theories, make sure you guys understood all of that. There is a TED Talk, which I linked online. You're welcome to look at that if you want. Make sure that you guys did go online and do the discussion board that I posted last Friday. If for some reason we don't have class on Wednesday for whatever reason, make sure to check back in. We'll probably do a Zoom class on Wednesday. But for now, this is just your lecture for Monday. And then on Wednesday, we'll jump back into whether it be face-to-face or Zoom. Okay? Hope you guys have a great day. Hope everything's going well. And I'll talk to you guys then. Bye-bye.